Good. All right, I'll be calling the village board meeting of March 14th to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Brochus.
Here.
Trustee Lucius. Trustee Brown.
Here.
Trustee Pankowski.
Here.
Trustee Hartman.
Here.
Trustee Kellewater. President Langford.
Here. Stand for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the village board on any issue. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. While the village board encourages input from residents, it may not discuss or act on any issue that is not duly noticed on the agenda.
I do have an email I received today for public comment from Bruce Schwager at 300 King Arthur's Court. In speaking with the DNR, Cross Plains has already spent $750,000 on well 3. It will cost approximately $10,000 to abandon a well. Hence, executing the contract, option A, seems most fiscally responsible. Municipalities have to do testing or putting the well online, and we request that PFAS sampling be part of that testing. A question about why the village is using City of Madison's SOPs for the collection of the PFAS samples. In speaking with the DNR, it has a grant program from EPA, and if the village follows the EPA sampling protocol for the grant, then the testing is free. If the village uses City of Madison's SOPs, then the sampling is not free. Sincerely, Mr. and Mrs. Schwager, 300 King Arthur's Court, Cross Plains, Wisconsin.
All righty. I don't see anything else. All right, we'll go to general business. Number 1, discussion and possible action regarding PFAS testing for well 3, including hiring municipal well and pump to install temporary pumping facility. Alan, why don't you go ahead and give everybody an overview?
Will do. Thanks everybody for being on short notice. So I guess the gist of where we're at right now is PFAS is a big buzzword in the industry. For those of you that are not familiar, that's the per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. A group of many man-made chemicals that are on waterproofing agents, non-stick pans, firefighting foams, etc. It's started to gain some traction recently because of some regulations that we'll get into shortly. But the gist of it is the last couple of weeks, the village, along with all communities with municipal water systems in the state, received a letter from the DNR saying that voluntary testing of PFAS would be funded essentially. The DNR will pay the costs of the test if you'd like to do voluntary testing. Through meetings with the village and through guidance with MEG, which is the Municipal Environmental Group, the position has been hold off on any of the voluntary testing for now, unless you have any known sources in the system. At the time that this was issued and this voluntary testing started to gain a little traction, there were no standards. There's really no answers yet. So again, it was, unless there's a reason to test, hold off. So that was the position we've been operating under. And more recently then, there has been a Natural Resources Board recommendation to the governor to establish a standard of 70 parts per trillion. The Department of Health Services recommended that it be set at 20, but again, that Natural Resources Board went in at 70. So we're all but a governor's signature away from having a drinking water standard of 70 parts per trillion.
And to add to that, the 70 number wasn't made up. That was what the EPA has been working on, 70 parts per trillion.
So that's a little bit, I guess, a little bit of the quick backstory on before Thursday the 3rd. Thursday, March 3rd, DNR issued a press release with a fish consumption advisory for Black Earth Creek. So there were trout samples taken from 2020 in the village of Cross Plains that came back with PFAS above the consumption guidance, which is different than that 70 that I'm referencing. So not a ton of info with it, just an advisory that was issued. Don't eat more than whatever it was, 1 meal a month of trout, 1 meal a week, thank you, of trout from Black Earth Creek. So that kind of had us backtracking now of, okay, we've got something potentially around that we need to try to get our eyes on, try to get a handle on. So as a result of that, staff has already begun diving into the sampling and protocols and what it takes to get samples of PFAS from wells 1 and 2, which are obviously already online, already providing water to the village. Have the equipment there to do that. What we came to the board with is well 3 is drilled, but there's no pump, there's no equipment, there's no power there. And what we want to do with the well 3 as it sits today. And really the options are test now or test later, because it looks like testing will be required in the future, but given the potential project that is looming, we wanted to make sure that the board was involved in any discussion how to handle well 3. So that's the first item on the agenda, so I won't get too far ahead of myself. 1 and 2 have been started. We've engaged Madison Water Utility, which is part of that public comment, to see if they would like to or would be able to assist the village in doing the sampling, because there's a lot of rules, a lot of no can do's when you're sampling, especially at concentrations of parts per trillion. Trying to work with a utility that's already done a number of samples in Madison, the city of Madison, trying to use our neighbors as a resource. So that's already begun. Well 3, then we would need to hire somebody, municipal well pump, to come back in, install a test pump, essentially turn the well over. So they would anticipate a pumping of about 24 hours, which would mean temporary power again, and then collect a raw water sample after the wells been turned over. We have talked to municipal. They've been talking about getting things done for approximately $15,000. As of today, their scheduling said they could be out here in the next week or 2, given a go ahead in the next day or 2. So we're probably a week or 2 out on a pump rig, and then testing typically takes about 4 weeks to get a result back. And then I guess I could kind of transition slightly into the contracts, because that alludes well to it.
Well, let's just hold off, because I think it's important. Here's why this is important to do it, and this is why we brought it back. I believe it's worth spending the money now, because if we wait until we put in $2 million into a well house and a permanent comes back, then we have to shut it down. Now we have a $2 million disaster. So the pressure on my point is we need to know now before we actually build it and get the well up and running and all that. So I think that's why we're looking to spend that kind of money now versus waiting for the well to be out and then test it. Bill and then Doug.
2 questions. So the PFAS were found in Black Earth Creek from fish 2020. Has there been any indication that, and we just don't know yet, that there's PFAS in any of the wells in the area?
There were positive results in Madison, but other neighbors, I guess most of you know, they haven't tested it.
The only samples within the area, they kind of came to light in conjunction with the trout was there have been samples along Black Earth Creek. And they do show elevated levels coming from the Middleton area. And you can, for those of you who know Black Earth Creek, there's a bunch of springs between here and there, so you can see the dilution of that happening.
Sure.
Based on the samples that have been collected. But none, to our knowledge, no documented well issues within the vicinity. The Madison wells that have had problems are not their far west side wells that I'm aware of.
Is well 3 using the same aquifer as well 2?
The same aquifer, but it's a different groundwater flow. So it's in the same pool of water, but generally groundwater flow in this area is towards Black Earth Creek and towards the downstream direction.
Okay.
And so because we're on opposite sides, yeah, so it's generally flowing this way, southern and easterly, and here northern and east, or sorry, westerly. So because and well 3 is going there, and well 2 is right here. So they're kind of coming from different recharge areas, even though they're in the same aquifer.
Okay. Okay.
If that makes sense.
So is it possible that these PFAS are from, like you said, the non-stick items and plastics and other types of man-made products? Could they be getting into the Black Earth Creek from the garbage that's outside on Quick Trip? And, you know, where there's garbage all along that creek, all year long. I mean, could that be causing the PFAS?
Oh, you're talking just like litter garbage?
Litter garbage, yeah.
Not at that concentration.
Really? Okay.
I mean, so litter garbage would be a source, but it's a very small source contributing to a very large stream. So even though we're talking parts per trillion, that's not where it's.
Okay.
But that's not unique to here. You know, there's other water bodies in the state of Wisconsin that have the same thing going on. It doesn't
Okay.
elevate.
Well, I was asking questions, so I thought it was
Yep.
good question.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's a very unique thing that we're dealing with. That's very different for.
Okay.
My question was with the PFAS being found in the fish. There's no testing of the Black Earth Creek water.
So the samples have been referenced going upstream to the headwaters or surface water samples. So there is a gradient from the headwaters of Black Earth Creek working with high concentrations. As you go downstream to Black Earth Creek, that becomes more and more, less and less because of the dilution of it.
Higher is the important part there. It does not exceed the proposed surface water standards that the DNR is.
Even up
Still,
by the headwaters.
even up by the head, right? That was 4 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
The standard that they're proposing for surface waters.
In this type of contamination, is it more or less likely to be on the surface like the creek or groundwater or as deep as a well, or it doesn't?
Very mobile.
Very mobile, no real rhyme.
It's everything. If you have familiarity with like groundwater contamination or oil contamination can either float or sink, like this is not that. So it just dissolves in water. It's kind of like salt, it'll just proliferate wherever the groundwater flow is. So it's not one of those types of contaminants that floats or sinks within the groundwater that,
And then is it something where the old landfill could be contamination?
depends who you ask.
Not recyclable.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that some of these chemicals came from like 3M in the 60s.
Yes, or like even earlier than that. PFO, one that everybody's getting really scared about, is the Teflon chemical that they used from the 60s and 70s. And this ban in the mid-80s. But if you guys, we were talking about this at staff meeting, if you guys have seen Dark Waters, that's what we're talking about. That chemical that we talk about in that movie is, except for there, is a million times more concentrated than what we're talking about.
Okay, right, yeah, test.
Okay, so I will propose a motion if you guys are okay with that. The motion would be approve hiring municipal well and pump on a time and material basis and for the village staff to implement testing of well 3 for PFAS compounds. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second discussion. Okay, Bill,
Where can the funds come from?
we'll have to take them from contingency right now. Well,
they can be reimbursements.
right, but for the short period, yeah. Unless water has fund balance of 15, we'll have to cover it.
Okay,
And then we'll build it into the loan.
okay.
Michael,
So this is just for the PFAS ones. What about the PFO?
Their PFAS is a generic description.
It's
There's
that includes-
27 compounds will be tested.
Oh, okay. That was my.
Huh? 32. I thought that was the expanded one. The full gamut.
I thought it was 30, that's what the news said, 30.
There's two different test methods. One gets 18 and one gets 33.
And one is not approved by the DNR and one is.
So it'll encompass
Yes.
all a bunch of acronyms. And yes,
What's 27, 27,
That's what I said. That was.
I swear it's 33.
I thought it was 32 too.
30, 32.
There's a lot.
Between 27 and 32.
Yes. Somewhere in there. But it's a standard test to encompass all of the chemicals. The 70, just so we're clear, is only two. It's PFOS and PFOA. So that's the combination of those two chemicals, and all of those other ones, they don't have standards for.
That was my follow-up question. You're talking about the 70 parts per
70
trillion.
parts per trillion is
It's
just those two.
two. It's not all 30.
Now, all of them have these varying levels, and I don't remember all the acronyms, but one acronym for the second round of them is, the number is 300 or 400, so it's not like 70 parts per trillion is going to turn into the new that encompasses all 30 some compounds. Each one has its own toxicity index, which is why they're starting with the two what have been deemed worst, PFOS and PFOA, and then they'll be over time expanding that.
Right.
So then going back to my original question with the 70 parts per trillion, you guys are just testing for the PFAS.
Nope, we're testing for everything.
Testing for everything, but the 70 parts per trillion only
Only
applies to
applies to
those.
those.
Okay, that's correct.
And just so you know, that is the standard that the state will say your well is contaminated.
Yeah, I just knew there
Which
was
isn't the law yet.
Right.
Also,
Right.
you can see why this is such a muddy topic for so many
Yeah.
people is.
Go ahead,
So
Andy.
the state's recommending 20 parts per trillion,
Department of Health Services is recommended.
okay, and then the EPA is at 70, and potentially governors might sign 70.
Because that's what came out of
The
the
State
DNR.
Natural Resources Board recommend, or has approved that. So it's two different state departments who have a difference.
If the tests come back favorable, what does that do to our time frame? It just pushes it back a little bit for the wall.
No, we'll be talking about that next. I just wanted to deal with this first, and then that's a whole different topic for the next.
But one other one, but still on this topic, what do you guys see? Do you have any crystal ball or anything like when all this testing starts in all these communities and wells and areas?
They're anticipating within the next year to 2 years
potential funding issues. And then there is the option to cancel bids outright and just wait for the sample to come back. The downside there being we've seen the volatility in the market. We've already got confirmation from bidders that if this gets bid out tomorrow, you're gonna pay more than what you did for these contracts. So the risk associated with signing today, from the contractor's perspective, is you're gonna pay us for if you had to cancel if well 3 came back hot. The fees that you would pay the contractor to cancel the bid are essentially paperwork time, processing submittals. They're not gonna have anything at well 3 yet. They're not gonna have anything constructed at well 3 yet. They won't have materials by then. So you'll be paying for the administrative time up front. Their opinion was proceed with the contract that we would have otherwise, but again, wanted to bring this to you because if 3 does have a high result from the sampling, that the village would incur costs to cancel that. But it does appear that those costs and that risk would be less than the other 2 options where you potentially risk a year worth of interim financing or canceling altogether and incurring additional costs by delaying the project. Hopefully that was my head, the picture I was trying to paint. We have the 3 options. We have them sitting here ready for a signature if we want, and we'll send them out to Fortune tomorrow. Otherwise, it's wait for a result from all 3 or cancel together.
Bill, when we were drilling the well, there was 2 depths that we drilled at. This one, which is the lesser, it's not this one and a lower one. The lower one we found to be more iron.
And the uranium was the hit. And this was the test well before this well. And that was actually covered.
Right. So if we do find PFAS in this well that is above the 70 parts per trillion, which would put us in jeopardy, would we be able to, at the same well site, just dig to the deeper well and sample there?
I would, if that were the case, the test well is still open. We would need to do a test pumping of the test well in the lower aquifer. And I would say that we would test the lower aquifer then for both uranium again and PFAS.
So we have to, if you guys remember when we bid out final well construction, we had thrown that adder on there to do investigations of that lower borehole. It was like, that was like $130,000 or something like that, to try and isolate where the uranium is coming from. So you'd have to do that to be able to be sure that you're not going to have a well with a different problem by going deep. And then in addition to that, then do PFAS testing. Sure. So, but that would be a potential option on that site.
Okay.
If you had an elevated PFAS.
But it's still more money.
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah. The unfortunate thing is, this is costing us more money.
Right.
There's just absolutely no way. The question is, do we gamble on, this is how I say it. We have, to me, I see 2. Basically, we cancel and then we're basically starting all over again after we get the testing, or we say, we go ahead, test, and if the test is good, then machine keeps moving, no change. If it's bad, we cancel, but we'll be out some money of the prep that they're going to be doing in between that time.
So it seems like the gamble is, do we just not sign the contract in the first place and get a bid that's super high? Or is this test going to come back within a decent margin of 70 parts per trillion and we'll lose this people?
Yeah, that's pretty, and there's obviously a delay if we redo everything. It'll be,
And the other thing that we actually talked about the other day was they're also dealing with increasing, adding to the risk, increasing interest rates.
yeah, there's monetary risk.
Right.
Go ahead.
The
Andrew.
other question I have then is, what happens if the test comes back at like 60 parts?
We're gonna have a
We're having a conversation.
really
we
long
did
meeting.
before.
You know what I mean? Like, cause then we're still.
Well, I think we'll have to discuss that at that time. You certainly right now could be thinking about that. You know, absolutely, you should be thinking about that. I'm certainly thinking about it, what the next steps will be if this or this happens. But right now, we gotta just take step one. And step one is, we've already decided to test it, which we have to do with that kind of investment. So now the question is, do we continue on our path, hoping everything's gonna be well, doing well with a potential cost? If we cancel, or we cancel and then have that cost when we rebid through interest rates in the bidding process.
What was the highest concentration of that?
I think it was like 6 or 7. I feel like one was 4 and then was 1.5. The PFOS and PFOA.
You can't tell that was better.
It was not near 70. It was not even above 10, if I remember right.
That's, you're talking about surface water?
That's surface water.
Michael?
So if it comes back above 70 or whatever, it's abandoned the well, and then we try to find a new site. There isn't any filtering water, is there? I mean, see, that's kind of.
That's a lengthy, complicated answer. Part of it is Bill's original question of, do you then investigate the lower borehole? Because that does have an aquitard, an impermeable barrier below whatever it is, 400 feet. You can treat PFAS, but it is the most expensive treatment that you can ever imagine for drinking water. So likely you would just look for a new well site if you couldn't make the lower borehole.
And so just as a follow-up, like that well had higher uranium levels. Can you treat for uranium? Can you treat for anything in waters?
You would have to, with uranium, you would put a shield so that doesn't get into the water.
That would be the ideal is
Yeah.
you would attempt to isolate which part of the aquifer the uranium is coming from. If that wasn't possible, treatment for uranium is an option. I mean, people treat for radioactive compounds all the time. But again, it all comes at a cost.
Well, yeah, well, like my question was like, can you treat these things, or is it just always like, oh, go try a new well somewhere? Like, is that always the other option?
Most of the time, you're better off drilling. Unless you are in an area, Toma, for example, has a lot of radium in their water. So there, if you find radium, you're probably just going to be stuck treating it because the next well you drill is going to be a 50-50 chance or at radium. So here, that's the challenging question. That there's probably 3 steps down the road if for some reason you have that result.
I was just curious about the treatment
Yep.
of those chemicals or any other ones, compounds.
Bill?
If we went forward with the current contract that we have, that we approved last month, if you had to guesstimate, and we had to shut down everything because we exceeded over the 70 parts per trillion. And we told them, I'm sorry, but we will not go forward. Can you get any idea what that would, we have to reimburse the vendor, or what we lose in that period of time for 2 months of work?
At that point, it's mostly hours, right? We're paying for time, not materials, not equipment. So if you,
I think the general index,
40.
it's tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands.
Okay,
Because you don't actually pay for the building materials, the pump, the electronics, and so on. Heat,
okay,
which is, given the climate right now, months down the road. So this is, again, just the administrative time, submittals, which is us reviewing what they want to buy.
sure.
And there is also the element of working with them. Just what do you need to get out right now?
Right,
What can we maybe lag on?
right.
Realistically, I mean, they're not even going to be mobilized by the time we have. you know, there will not even be a piece of equipment
Sure.
here by the time we have the result. Ideally.
So what we need to talk about is, do we want to list that versus having to rebid again?
Right.
You know, and it could cost us, I mean, we shot up $1 million in a period of 6 months. You know,
Yeah, I'm not, hey, my feeling is that we move forward. I just don't.
yeah,
I just don't think there's another good option. And, I'm not willing to wait 2-3 years for well fruit.
it's a struggle. It's a tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do have, if it sounds like, go ahead, Andy. Well, I have one written in.
Okay, go for it.
All right, to see if this matches yours. Approve, continue execution of the 2022 water system improvement contracts with the understanding that if PFAS are elevated to a level of concern, the village will cancel contracts and negotiate payment of expenses incurred with Portson. All right, is there any discussion?
Is the concern level the 70 parts per trillion?
No, I think it's bigger than that. I think if it hits 65, I think we gotta have a talk on what are we gonna do. So that's why I didn't put in 70. I said levels of concern. I didn't have it. So,
Yeah, you're gonna be a point where if the numbers come back even remotely questionable, we'll be here again.
Because the other side of it is,
Well,
what
not
happens if you have one of the other 30 compounds that is elevated to the distance standards that DNR's talked about, that is not part of that 70. So I mean, I think it's best not to define what that threshold is right now. Let's just get results.
So did you propose like option A, continuing?
yeah, this option would be continue with that. And if the levels come high, we have the ability to cancel and negotiate what we owe them up to this point, to the point of cancellation.
Okay. I mean, I just to say, to second what Bill just said, I think risking 40 or 50, we're gonna lose that on a rebid, no problem. But that's gone if we rebid it, I know that for sure. So it just seems like the best deal.
Any other discussion? Michael, you look puzzled. What's the,
No, rather than doing the delay and possibly take a hit if it's over. Well, I guess which one's gonna, if it comes back at elbow level, we should have, which one's gonna cost us?
The delay, the thing you risk there is there's a real possibility you don't need the funding. And so that will cost you more because if you award the contract, still you have a year of interim financing interest on a $3 million project. On top of interest rates are going to go up over the next year, so your loan closing for the final loan would be. So that's probably darn near a similar cost that we did. That's the way they're talking interest rates. Now again, that's conjecture, but that's what you put at risk by delaying at this point.
all right,
So that means by the delay, we have until May 31st to execute. Right?
You have May 31st to have fully executed contracts. You need about 30 days. to execute contracts. Once Jay signs this, you will not have a full document for about 30 days because then the contractor has to go to his bond, he has to get insurance, all of those things that he hasn't done yet because he doesn't have a contract. It takes them a period of time to process.
yeah, it's not like we can wait till May 31st and then say go.
So really, if we
Well, that's
don't
what
have
I'm figuring out.
May
No, it's
1st is
April.
probably the date that you want to have everything done, ready to go. And that's the challenging part is you likely won't have results by then.
There's no win in this, to be honest with you.
Well, that's why I was like, we have to the end of May, that's when lots of sound like the time, but now you're saying the executed contract on May 31st, which we signed it to them, they do their 2+, it's that, everyone that I wasn't putting in the figure.
The only way is we do testing, it's so low, that it's microscopic, you know, it's way below the even 20 parts per trillion. and-
Yeah, but we're still losing 15,000 because we had to test it.
Right, but that's the worst.
I know, but I mean, that's a loss to me. There's no win.
You take that loss over the alternative.
Well, but my point, it would be nice if we didn't even have to worry about the solution, right? We just build the well.
I agree.
Life's all about timing. It could have been a
The only, it's peanuts in the grand scheme of things. The only thing I do want to point out, Mike, we talked about this. It's spring, the frost coming out of the ground. Test pump rig it's gonna tear up the park, getting up the hill. It's gonna be mud, it's gonna be messy. But again, I think that's peanuts for what we're talking about, but I want to make that point because municipals pointed it out and obviously we're in the public eye there. So.
But the nice thing, we do have a cement driveway, over halfway there, yeah. Yeah, we'll take some hits for the
We do have maps to put down the rest of they used
Last time.
We can get them quite close without much. There will still be some damage to some.
Right.
It's not gonna look like a problem.
But if the contract goes ahead anyways, it's gonna be ripped up.
There will be-
Matter of 6 months anyways.
Yeah. All right, are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same. So moved. All right, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Yes, so moved.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I didn't want